All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. You are live and direct once again with your Akazaki Yahoo. I'm giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Mamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel, who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruki. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together. And we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Hallelujah. All praises to the mighty Yah.
Hallelujah.
Yes, indeed. I'm joined this evening by my most esteemed Kenaniah. Shalom, Aki.
Shalom, Maki. Shalom, Yasharal. Kwam Yasharala.
Yes, indeed. Rise, Israel, rise. Peace and blessings to the 12 tribes and praises to the Abba. We are back again for another Yom Shishi evening. It's later than we anticipated. Got into some some good information. Indeed. Praises to the Abba. We have. I'm gonna warn y'all right here at the gate. We are less than 2 minutes in. This video is very hard to deal with, to watch, to deal with, to process. It's very difficult because it's our historical situations that have happened in this country. This brother by the name of LQ Ivy was a black teenager, and because of a lie, he was L-worded, as you can see on the screen here, in 1925 in Mississippi. This brother's going to go through it and talk about it. And because it's such a disheartening video, we have Malcolm X coming up after this. So hopefully Malcolm will give us some uplift and raise our spirits to hear some of the things that he talks about there. So this information needs to be shared, and that's exactly what we're going to do. This brother, by the way, give his brothers his props. His information is in the description box. Julian Johnson Law. Julian Johnson is his name. He is a lawyer, and he's covering a lot of these stories. We're going to be reviewing a lot of these stories and getting this information out to the people so that we can be privy to the information. All right, let's get to it and get through it. Praises to the Most High, not for the historical situation, but for the knowledge for us to understand these things and deal with it. So here we go.
Some stories are hard to hear, and this is one of them. I have to be honest about that. This story is absolutely horrific, but it's a real story. It happened to a real black person during a time when stories like this were common. This is the kind of story some people want to forget about. They don't want to talk about the brutality and the pain that black people endured for centuries. But this story has to be told. It has to be told so that the memory of those who lived and died in injustice is not lost to injustice. They matter. And what happened to them mattered. This story is just one of thousands. Before I tell you what happened in the story, let me set the scene for you first. Because I want you to understand what I'm going to tell you was not an isolated event. I've talked before about lynchings in Mississippi and how bad they were. By 1962, at least 538 black people had been lynched in Mississippi alone. It was the highest number in the United States. Even though Georgia and Texas were close rivals, Mississippi was the worst. It was also the most embarrassing state for members of Congress who opposed passing federal anti-lynching law. Mississippi ranked first in every category. First in the most lynchings. First in the most multiple lynchings. First in lynchings per capita. First in female victims. First in victims taken from police custody. First in lynchings with no arrest or convictions of the mob. First in public support for mob justice. Until the late 19th century, hanging and firing of victims were the most common forms of lynchings in Mississippi. But as overall lynching numbers began to decline in the 20th century, the mobs grew even more gruesome and barbaric. Mississippi mobs lynched black people with blowtorches. They tortured victims with hot irons. They drowned them. They bludgeoned them. They dragged them behind cars. Whereas mutilation was once rare, it became commonplace. Between 1900 and 1940, at least 15 Black people were lynched by public burning. One newspaper called these Negro barbecues. In 1904, Luther Hopper and his wife were lynched by being burned alive after he was accused of taking the life of a white planter. A crowd of 1,000 gathered to watch. Before burning them, the mob cut off their ears and severed their fingers, and they gouged out their eyes, one by one. And as bad as this sounds, in this video, I'm going to tell you about an absolutely horrific story. A story about a Black teen in Mississippi. A Black teen who found himself a victim of Mississippi's most gruesome form of mob violence. L.Q. Ivy was born to Jim Ivy and Allie Pegas in 1907. He was one of several children. Both Jim and Allie were the children of formerly enslaved Black people. Jim was born in 1872 and Allie in 1884. The two married in 1903 and had 7 children together, 4 girls and 3 boys. The family worked hard as farmers, steadily building on what they had, and they did well for themselves. So well that Jim was able to do something that not a lot of Black people were able to do. By 1920, he owned his own car. This was no insignificant feat. Being able to purchase a vehicle was a sign of upward mobility and financial stability, something practically no Black family had during this time and only a small number of whites could afford. In just 3 generations, LQ's family had gone from the chains of slavery and bondage to defying expectations. Black people were supposed to stay at the bottom, but they refused. LQ's ancestors, 2 sisters named Harriet and Lottie, were enslaved in South Carolina and brought to Texas by the Pegasus, the white family that owned them. They walked a perilous journey, moving from one state of bondage and brutality to another. They left slavery and entered freedom with nothing. And yet, just a few generations later, their descendants were thriving. But all of this was about to change because, as I said before, during this time, injustice was always lurking around the corner. And it didn't matter how hard you worked or how well you were doing in life. All that mattered was race. And all that mattered was injustice. By 1925, LQ was around 17 years old. He was described as a quiet young man with a good sense of humor, someone people enjoyed being around. He was funny, but he was also respectful. He was likable, but also kind. The type of person who was always willing to lend a helping hand to someone in need, regardless of who they were or where they came from. One day, LQ helped a white man named Jeff Prather. Jeff's car had broken down, and when LQ saw him stranded on the side of the road, he didn't hesitate to stop and help. When Jeff offered to pay him, LQ refused. That was just the kind of person he was. Kind, considerate, and selfless. And he had a girlfriend too, a young woman named Inez Williams. His parents, Jim and Allie, often said that LQ was the kind of son every parent hoped for, and they considered themselves lucky to have him. LQ wasn't just a good son. He was a brother, a friend, and a neighbor. People knew him for his kindness, his willingness to help, and his easygoing nature. He was someone worth remembering, not just for how he died, but for how he lived. I told you these details about LQ and his family because it's rare that I get to tell you about family details. It's rare that I get to tell you about the humanity of a Black person who suffered at the hands of injustice and hatred. So many times, the dignity of how a person lived is forgotten, buried beneath the loss, the trauma, and the pain they suffered. The lynching often overshadows the love they had for their family and friends. The brutality they experienced is told, but not the bonds they built in their community. We know of the cruelty they endured in death, but not the compassion they showed in life. We know the lies told to justify their death, but not the legacy they left behind. We speak of the horror the mob inflicted on them, but we don't speak of their heart. And that is the byproduct of injustice and racism. The love and the life of a person are hidden behind the lynching tree of terror and shame. We've spent time learning about LQ, his life, and his family, and the love that surrounded him. But this is where the humanity ends and the brutality begins. From here, the story takes a turn into something truly horrific, something that reveals the depths of cruelty and inhumanity. What happens next is a reminder of just how deep hatred can go. September 18, 1925 was supposed to be just another day for LQ, and it was one he was excited about because he was going to make some money. LQ had been hired by a man named Lawrence Goolsby to cut timber on Goolsby's sawmill. That morning, he left his home in Lafayette County and traveled to Union County, where the sawmill was located. He was prepared for a long day of work. Now, you have to understand, cutting timber was hard work. It was a job for men, demanding both grit and strength. The fact that 17-year-old LQ was hired for this meant something. He was stepping out of boyhood and into manhood, and he was ready for this, ready to contribute, to build, to continue his family's legacy of progress. That day, LQ worked alongside 3 other young men, Cleveland Jones, Sherrill Kilpatrick, and Spencer Ivy. Together, they spent the morning cutting timber under the brutal and unrelenting Mississippi sun. By lunchtime, they were exhausted and ready for a break. They made their way to a local well to get a drink of water. Little did LQ know, this would be the last moment of peace he would ever have in his short life. At the same time that LQ and the other young men were resting from their workday, something horrible was happening. Bessie Gaines, a 22-year-old white woman, reported a crime for which there was only one punishment, a crime where the mob never waited for the courts, a crime where they saw it as their duty to carry out the arrest, the trial, and the execution on their own terms. Bessie Gaines was from a prominent family in Union County. The family lived in Etta. Her father, Bob Gaines, was a prominent and well-known farmer. On Friday, September 18, 1925, the same day LQ was cutting timber for Lawrence Goolsby, Bessie claimed that she was attacked. She said that she had left her baby inside the family home and went into the field to pick peas. That's when, she said, a black man attacked her. She later told authorities that she was in such bad condition that she had to crawl back to the house. When her family found her, she was so distraught she couldn't speak clearly. A neighbor immediately drove her to Mays Hospital in New Albany and called Sheriff John W. Roberts. Sheriff John Roberts wasted no time. He gathered a posse of men and dogs to hunt down the alleged perpetrator. They took the dogs to the pea patch where Bessie said she had been attacked. The dogs sniffed the ground and then took off running. The men followed through the fields and the woods until they came upon 3 black men cutting timber: LQ, Cleveland Jones, and Sherrill Kilpatrick. What happened next is unclear. We don't know what was said. We don't know what was done. What we do know is this: LQ was the one who was arrested. Why he was arrested, we don't know. Some have suggested that it may have been LQ's father's success. His father, Jim Ivy, had secured a contract to haul gravel for the new highway. In a time when white people were struggling, Jim's success was seen as an affront to white rule and may have been a cause for LQ being blamed for this crime. Fearing he would be lynched, authorities quickly moved LQ to Aberdeen to get him away from the mob. But word spread fast. Bob Gaines' daughter had been attacked, and the suspect was a black man. Shock turned to rage, and then rage turned to mob vengeance. Soon, a crowd of over 300 people gathered outside the courthouse. One newspaper reported that men abandoned their crops in their fields as soon as they heard the news. Outside the courthouse, the mob demanded that LQ be turned over to them. The mob wanted blood, and they weren't leaving until they got what they came for. As time passed, the crowd swelled, and their rage intensified. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before they couldn't be contained, and that violence was coming. Then Mississippi U.S. Senator Hubert D. Stevens, a Union County native, came out to see if he could calm the mob. To his surprise, he was able to get them to leave. But let's be clear, Stevens didn't do this because he was against lynching, and he certainly wasn't a defender of black people. At the time, the NAACP was leading the charge against lynching, pushing for the federal government to finally take action and pass a law. Over 100 anti-lynching bills were introduced in Congress between 1882 and 1952. Not a single one of them passed. Southern legislators, including men like Stevens, led the opposition. Their reason was that the federal government had no right to tell Southern states how to handle their black population. And Stevens feared that LQ's lynching would be another reason to point the finger at Mississippi for why a federal anti-lynching bill was necessary. The mob leaving was only temporary. They had no intention of letting this go. They were only going home for the evening. Soon, plans began to take shape to ensure that they would get access to LQ. A group of men from Etta obtained a writ from Judge Thomas Pegram, requiring Sheriff Roberts to bring LQ back to New Albany. They told the judge that Bessie needed to see LQ to confirm his identity because they feared that she might not survive her injuries. But this was clearly a setup. Sheriff Roberts had no choice but to comply. But he also knew that if he brought LQ back to the New Albany courthouse, the mob would seize him. So instead, he quietly took LQ to the hospital for identification without the mob knowing. Inside the hospital room, Bessie sat face to face with LQ. Also in the room was Sheriff Roberts, Judge Pegram, and attorney L.K. Carlton. They asked Bessie if LQ was the one who attacked her. She looked at him and hesitated. Then she said she thought he might be, but her answer was uncertain. Attorney L.K. Carlton wasn't satisfied. He pushed her further. He said, if you testify in court, would you say LQ was the attacker? Bessie looked at LQ again, and then she said, "I think I would." Her response left more questions than answers. Even her own father, who was in the room, also expressed his doubt that LQ was guilty. We need to step back for a moment and take in what just happened, because this wasn't just a legal process. This was literally a life or death moment. LQ was still a child, still a boy, and yet here he was standing in a room with grown men who were deciding his fate. Make no mistake about it, no one really believed that LQ would see the inside of a courtroom. Everyone knew what was going to happen, that he would be lynched. And on the question of his so-called guilt, of whether he was the attacker, no one truly believed that he was. But did that even matter? Because for Black people during this time, the accusation was the conviction. Can you imagine how LQ felt? What must have been going through his mind? This was supposed to be a normal day for him, a normal day of work. His chance to prove to his father and his family that he could contribute. And now he was standing in a room watching his life be negotiated. I can't even imagine the fear that took over him, the hopelessness that must have set in. But maybe, just maybe, he had a small sliver of hope. What if they saw the truth? What if they realized I'm not the man they're looking for? What if they let me go? That human instinct, that belief that if truth is soon discovered, that things will work out. But in reality, that was not the case for Black people. That did not exist. We were never given the benefit of the doubt, only the presumption of guilt, only the presumption of dangerousness. And for so many, including LQ, his sentence had already been decided. As LQ's fate was being decided in the hospital, word spread across town that he was back. It didn't take long for the mob to return to the courthouse. But when they got there, they realized he wasn't inside. They quickly learned where he was. LQ was at the hospital. The mob rushed there, demanding that the sheriff turn him over. They wanted to get this over with, and Sheriff Roberts was the only thing standing in their way. At this point, every single second mattered. The mob could have stormed in and taken LQ at any moment. So the sheriff came up with a plan. He would get LQ out while others distracted the mob. As Sheriff Roberts hurried LQ into his police car, Judge Pegram and Attorney Carlton tried to calm the angry mob. And they weren't just angry, they were armed. Sheriff's deputies moved through the crowd, taking weapons as Judge Pegram pleaded with the men to follow him back to the courthouse. He promised them if they gave him a chance, he would ensure LQ received a quick trial and punishment. But soon, the mob was tipped off. Someone told them that they had been lied to. LQ was already gone. A man named Clyde Nash had the fastest car in town, and he volunteered to chase the sheriff down. Nash jumped into his car and took a few men with him and raced towards the Myrtle Bridge. Their goal was to cut the sheriff off. Meanwhile, Sheriff Roberts and LQ thought they had gotten away. When they got to the bridge, they saw Nash and another group of cars parked, blocking their path. And soon, another group of mob members were behind them, blocking their path of escape. They were completely surrounded. More than 1,000 people had gathered at that bridge, waiting for LQ. And yet, there was no violence. No one fired. No fights. No arguments. Sheriff Roberts simply handed LQ over to the mob. And then he was tied to the flatbed truck and made to run alongside it as the truck drove back to Rocky Ford. I have to ask again, can you imagine what this moment must have felt like for LQ? Don't move past this so quickly. Really think about it. I want you to stop and sit in this moment. Think about what must have been going through LQ's mind. 1,000 thoughts, 1,000 miles an hour. Questions like, what's going on? Are they going to hurt me? Take my life? I just want to go home. Where are my parents? Maybe deep down, he already knew that for Black people in moments like this, there were no second chances, no right answers, no magic words that could get him out of this. But in the end, there was only one answer to every one of those questions, and that was injustice. LQ was taken back to the spot of the alleged attack by Thad Parker, Bill Greer, and his father, Book Greer. They took him to the barn, a place where they could do what they wanted to him. These men wanted LQ to confess before they carried out their sentence on him, but he had nothing to confess to. It was inside this barn where horrific things occurred. LQ, this 17-year-old boy, was brutally beaten by these grown men. They punched him and kicked him and struck him over and over again. They demanded he confess, but he would not. because he had nothing to confess to. They stripped him of his clothes. They hung him from the barn rafter. And still, he would not confess. So they burned him with a blowtorch, singed the hair off his body. They mutilated him, cut him. They used a lemon squeezer to crush LQ's testicles. This was unspeakable brutality. But to these men, it was easy. It didn't bother them. Not that they were doing this to a child. Not that LQ had never been positively identified as Bessie's attacker. Because to them, LQ wasn't a child. He wasn't even a person. He was just another black body to destroy. LQ's only crime was being black. Bessie said a black man did it, LQ was black, and that was enough. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need an investigation. They didn't even need to talk to Bessie, because that is what it was like for black people. Conviction on sight. Prosecution and a death sentence without evidence. Blackness was the crime. Blackness was the trial. Blackness was the conviction. Blackness was the reason for your sentence, the death penalty. LQ Ivy, just 17 years old, was experiencing something that countless other black men had suffered before him. Now, I need to prepare you for what's coming. From here, the story gets worse, much worse, unimaginably worse. I want you to know that up front. What I'm about to tell you will anger many of you. Some of you may even feel physically sick. That's how disturbing it is. But as troublesome as it is to hear, we have to finish LQ's story. We have to tell everything that happened to him. Some refuse to believe this happened. Some try to erase it, but we know the truth because it happened over and over again. Thousands of times, thousands lynched, thousands railroaded in unjust courts, thousands brutalized, thousands terrorized, thousands stolen from this world. And even though some want to turn the page on what has happened, we won't. We honor these victims by telling their stories. This is hard to hear, but imagine what it was like to live through this. So take a deep breath. We're not done yet. Now let me tell you what happened to LQ. After torturing, brutalizing, and mutilating LQ, there was only one thing left to do. One final act of mob rule to carry out. And that was to take LQ's life. There was never a question, never a moment of hesitation. It didn't matter whether LQ confessed or not. His fate was sealed. Sealed the moment the dogs came upon him and the other two black young men taking a rest at the well. And now the mob had one final decision to make, how they would do it. For LQ, a rope and a tree wouldn't be enough. They wanted something more, something worse. They wanted to set him on fire. And they weren't going to do it in secret. They wanted an audience. They wanted a crowd. They wanted witnesses. And they wanted to send a message to every black person. This is what happens to you. This is what we can do to you. No one can stop us. We are the law, and you are nothing to us. This is going to be a spectacle, a public event, a celebration, a fun, joyous occasion. And all of it, every laugh, every cheer will come at the expense of a 17-year-old boy. A boy who in all likelihood was innocent. The mob drove LQ to an open clearing, a place wide enough to accommodate the public burning. What was LQ thinking as they drove him to this execution? What thoughts raced through his mind? All I can think of is fear, horrific fear. Fear that makes you sick to your stomach. Fear that takes your breath away. Fear so deep, tears refuse to fall. Unimaginable fear. But fear did not stop time. It didn't stop injustice, because injustice kept moving. LQ was brought to a large mound of sawdust and forced to stand there. He watched as the men drove a metal stake deep into the ground, a stake he would be tied to. As the men prepared to burn him alive, LQ bowed his head and he prayed. He prayed for himself and he prayed for the men. He asked God to save him. That was all that he could do in that moment. After everything was set up and in place, the mob did something to make sure they would never forget this moment. They took a picture to freeze this moment in time. They wanted to memorialize this pain. They wanted proof that they were a part of this horror show. They were proud of what they were about to do. And they wanted everyone to know that they were there, that they did this. Before I continue, I need to prepare you for what you're about to see. Up until now, we've been using a stand-in image for LQ. In these videos, we often do this to give a face to their story because we rarely have images of them, but there is an image of LQ. there is a real photo of him standing with the mob. We haven't showed it yet because this is a painful picture to look at. It shows LQ in his final moments, and I didn't want to show it over and over again. But now, this is LQ Ivy. This is the boy who was tortured in the barn. This is the 17-year-old black teen moments before he was about to be burned alive. Don't move past this moment. Really look at him. Take it in. Think about what he was going through in this moment. He was alone. He was afraid. And he was moments away from dying a horrific death. But LQ wasn't really alone. As he stood there in fear and in terror, he was surrounded by a mob of unshaken determination. Take a look at them. Look at how they stand there, proud and defiant, without an ounce of shame. LQ in the middle, flanked by these men. No sheets, no hoods, no cover of darkness. This was broad daylight. It was them, looking straight ahead. They weren't hiding. They weren't afraid of being seen, because they knew there would be no consequences. They wanted this moment to be remembered, to be celebrated, to be a warning, because in their minds, it was just another Sunday, and LQ was just another black person about to be lynched. I've been a lawyer for a long time, and I've handled some pretty tough cases. Needless to say, I've seen a lot. When you're involved in police brutality, wrongful death, or personal injury cases, you see some pretty gruesome images. But I don't think I've ever seen images that grip me like these. It wasn't that these were the most gruesome things I've ever seen. It was something else. It was the calmness. Here was a teenage boy, surrounded by men who were about to inflict horror on him. And that's what makes it so chilling. There was peace in their horror, calmness in their cruelty. And here was this black boy, looking at the camera, almost as if he's looking at you, waiting for his next moment. And maybe it's just me, but I see in his face that he knew that it was over. There are many images of lynching victims, but most of them were taken after everything was over, after the life had been taken, after the mob had gone home. But images like this one, ones taken before the act was carried out, are rare. And in many ways, they're worse, because we see the hopelessness in the victim. We see the understanding that there is no way out. And we see the mob pause to memorialize their savagery. Think about that. They paused. They stopped before carrying out the brutality, just to make sure that they got the photo right. And that moment, that pause to pose for the camera, tells us everything we need to know about the depth of human depravity. Because this wasn't just a photo. This was a carefully staged image that determined where they would stand, who was the right height for the shot, where they wanted their hands to be placed, if the lighting was good enough, if the photographer was at the right distance to capture everyone, and if LQ was in the right spot. Think about how much effort we put into taking a photo today, how we adjust the lighting, move around, get in position. They did even more to get the picture-perfect pre-lynching photograph. LQ knew there was no escaping this. He knew his fate was sealed. He knew he wasn't going home. He knew he was in his last moments, and he knew it was going to be brutal. LQ reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys to his father's car and handed them to Stout Nowlin. "Give these back to my father," he said. Nowlin looked at LQ. Then he said, "If you did it, be a man and own up to it," as if LQ's confession would somehow cleanse the mob of what they were about to do. LQ looked at him and shook his head. "I didn't do it," he pleaded. One last time, but no one cared. This burning was going forward, confession or not. Nowlin took the keys and said, "I'll give them to your father." They took wooden planks and soaked them in kerosene. Then they poured kerosene all over LQ. He was tied to the stake, wrapped in chains, his feet, his wrists, his neck, all locked in place. The mob made sure there was enough kerosene-soaked wood around him. Then, one last time, LQ was asked if he wanted to confess. Later, the mob would claim that he did, that he not only confessed, but he named 3 accomplices. But you have to take that with a grain of salt, because Bessie never said there were 4 men. She said there was only one. So this so-called confession wasn't the truth. It was just another lie, a lie to justify what they did next. Think back to how this day started. It started with promise. It started with LQ excited to work, to make money. It started with one black teen setting out to have a normal, regular day. But he never thought it would end like this. He never thought it would end with him tied to a stake, preparing to be burned alive. This was Black life. At any moment, your entire world could change. The rug ripped from beneath you. No warning, no reason. Injustice could snatch you, could take your life in an instant. The time had come to finish this. 5 men, 1 woman. They struck matches. Then, one by one, they threw them onto the kerosene-soaked wood. The fire caught. Then it climbed. Then it roared. The flames rose, swallowing LQ. LQ kicked. He thrashed. He screamed. He screamed for his life. He was 17 years old, alone, burning alive for something he did not do. Apparently, one of the women in the crowd could not take it. A woman named Ro Manor. She came out from the crowd and begged the rest of the mob to stop this grisly act. But no one listened. So she acted. She ran forward and threw water onto the fire. But before the flames could die, men rushed in and grabbed her. They held her back because this was going to happen. Nothing and no one was going to stop this horrific act. The fire raged. The heat burned the air. LQ kept fighting. Somehow, he freed his legs, but his arms and his neck still chained. His 17-year-old voice cried out through the flames, but no one cared. In fact, they relished every single second. From the crowd, a voice rang out. He should have thought about this before. Then another that said, it's time to finish this. They piled more wood around LQ. The fire then completely consumed his body. And as it did, LQ screamed to God again and again. But his final words, his last breath on earth, were, I didn't do it. And with that, LQ was gone. His life stolen. His death slow and agonizing. His last moments on earth filled with terror and pain. I struggled to find the words to talk about this. The English language simply isn't expansive enough to truly capture what happened to this child. Because this was pure savagery. And they carried it out with glee. They carried it out with joy. And they carried it out with pride and with determination. And they carried it out for one reason. Because LQ was Black. And because he was Black, he was denied dignity in life. And he was denied dignity in death. He was only entitled to 2 things: injustice and brutality. After the mob was done, they were tired and they were hungry. It had been a long day's work, so many of them left. They went into town to get something to eat because what they had just done didn't ruin their appetite. If anything, it made them hungrier. And they weren't bothered by the screams, and they weren't haunted by what they had done. This was life to them. Torturing and burning a 17-year-old boy alive wasn't something to hide. It was something to celebrate. And that's exactly how they planned to end this night, by celebrating what they had just carried out. Before I end this part of the story, there's something else you need to know. There's another image from that day, one that I haven't shown you. It's LQ tied to the stake. I didn't show it here because some things are just too painful, but I think you should see it. You need to see what brutality looked like, what injustice was. See what they did to this Black child. I've included it on my website's blog for those who have the strength to see it. And if you choose not to look, I understand, because this isn't just history, it's horror. And even for me, learning about this, seeing these images, it was difficult. So far, we've been following LQ's story, what happened to him before and after the arrest. But we haven't talked about his family because there were 2 sides to this suffering, 2 strands of pain twisted together. One endured the flames and the others endured the waiting. Both were tortured in different ways. LQ never came home after work, and his family grew worried. His father, Jim Ivey, soon got word that his youngest son had been arrested. He rushed to New Albany to see what was happening, to try to save his boy, but he was too late. By the time he reached the courthouse, the mob was already there, already assembled, already angry, already demanding his son. Jim Ivey was just one man, and he was no match for an angry mob. He knew there was nothing he could do, no one to plead to, no one to ask for help. And so he did what so many Black mothers and fathers had to do in moments like this. He turned around and he went home. He knew the mob would have its way. He knew that his son would likely die. What did Jim say when he walked through their door? What words did he have for Allie? What did he tell his children about their brother? We don't know exactly what he said, but we do know what it meant. A father returning home without his son. A house filled with silence. A silence heavy with dread. But this was Mississippi in 1925, a time when a Black person could be lynched and no one cared to do anything about it. Black people were lynched for fun, a time when suffering was expected, a time when brutality was a certainty. They knew what was coming. They just didn't know how. By Saturday afternoon, word spread through the Black community. LQ had been taken. The mob had him. Their worst fear, the one they always carried, had come true. The mob had taken their son. And now it was only a matter of time. But yet, still they prayed. They prayed for a miracle. LQ's family gathered at Baker's Chapel Church with friends and family. They did their best to comfort one another. But between the prayers and the embraces, there were tears. Between the hymns and the songs, there were sobs. Between reaffirming scriptures of deliverance, there was gut-wrenching hopelessness. The feeling that there was nothing they could do. They could not save their boy. When no more news came, the family left the church. They went home, but they didn't sleep. Not far from Jim and Allie's home was another family that was also waiting. Eliza Visor was LQ's aunt. She was Allie's sister. She had known LQ since the day he was born. And now she was waiting up, knowing her little nephew was in grave danger. Inside the Visor home, the doors were locked. The lights were off. The family hid away, waiting. Eliza sent her own children to bed. Macy and AJ couldn't sleep because outside the road wasn't empty like it usually was. They could hear it, the passing cars, one after another. They peeked out the windows and they saw 29 cars go by, far more than the usual for this quiet road. And with every passing headlight, they wondered, did those drivers know something about LQ? Did they know what had already been decided? The next morning was Sunday, but it wasn't just any Sunday. It was the Sunday after the mob took LQ. Still, the family hadn't heard any news, so they did what they always did. They prepared for church. But in that church, there was no peace because LQ was on their hearts, on their minds. And when the service ended, Eliza went straight to see her sister. Eliza was hoping that maybe she could help comfort her sister. When she arrived, she found Allie lying across her bed, silent. She didn't move. She didn't speak. Eliza sat beside her, and together they sat in silence because there was nothing left to say. That afternoon, Eliza returned home to tend to her own family, but she barely made it through the door when she saw her white neighbors, Rush and America Scott, approaching. They had been to the lynching site. They had seen what was happening, and they had come to deliver the news. The mob was about to burn LQ alive. What she heard was unbearable. The thought of her nephew being burned alive was horrendous. But what she had to do next was even worse. She had to tell her sister. She was the person who had to break the news to her sister that her boy was about to die a horrific death. And with the weight of this responsibility, Eliza headed back to see Allie. When she made it back to Allie, she looked at her sister and said, "Allie, you told me if I heard anything, come back and tell you." She paused, then said, "They're burning up your child today." Allie slumped into a chair. She didn't cry. She just moaned, a sound that no one ever forgot. The life was knocked out of her right then and right there. Now, don't move past this too quickly. Sit here. Stay right here in this moment, in that room. Two sisters, two Black women, two mothers, one carrying the news, the other carrying the loss. Can you even imagine? Can you imagine what it took for Eliza to say those words? Your child will be burned today. Can you imagine what it did to Allie to hear them? This is what injustice did, what it was designed to do. It shattered Black lives. It stole their peace. It crushed their dignity. And it took Allie and Jim's boy. Her family said that she began to die right there. And within a year, Allie was dead. After the mob was done, a white man named Sam Bullock sent word to Jim Ivey he could come and collect what was left of his son. But Jim Ivey couldn't do it. He couldn't drive to that site. He couldn't see his son like that. He just couldn't. So the task fell to LQ's brother, JD, and two of his friends, Shep Boone and Gates Kilpatrick. They would go. They would help bring LQ home. When they arrived at the lynching site, JD couldn't move. He sat in the car, staring. This is where his brother died. This was where they burned him alive. His hands shook and his body felt weak. And when he tried to step out, he just couldn't. So Shep said he would do it. Shep stepped forward, and all he saw was a pile of burned wood and ash and ruins and charred remains. Almost nothing. But then in the remains, he saw it, what he believed to be LQ's heart, and he retrieved it and placed it in an apple box and carried it back to the car, because that was all that was left of LQ. That was all they had to bury. And they laid LQ to rest at Baker's Chapel Church later that day. In the days that followed, Union County whispered about what happened. The story spread behind closed doors, in barbershops, in hushed and fearful conversations. No one spoke too loudly because the truth was clear and there was fear amongst the Black population. So Black people stayed silent. There was no public grief, no loud cries in the street, just quiet mourning behind closed doors, because speaking too much, too openly, could bring trouble. On Monday, when the newspapers ran the story of what happened, the school children gathered to read it. Among them was Inez Williams, LQ's girlfriend. She read the words. She read what they did to LQ, and she broke down. She cried uncontrollably. She shook her head and was overwhelmed. She couldn't understand how they could do something like that to someone so young, someone that she loved and cared about. As for the mob, no one was ever held accountable. Everyone knew who did it, and the mob wasn't hiding. They had their faces in full view. They posed for pictures because this wasn't a crime to them. It was a celebration. Officials claimed that they couldn't identify a single person who was present that day. Sheriff Roberts swore that he didn't recognize a single one of the 1,000+ people who stormed the bridge and took LQ from his custody. Mississippi's governor, Henry Whitefield, promised to launch an investigation, but that was just talk. William Bradshaw, one of the mob members, didn't just stay quiet. He bragged. He laughed at the idea of justice. He said no one would ever point a finger because they were all neighbors, because they all knew each other, because silence was the code. A grand jury was called, but everyone knew what that meant. It meant nothing. No arrests, no trials, no consequences, because there was never going to be justice for LQ Ivey. Call it fate, call it coincidence, but one by one, many of the mob members met their own gruesome ends. Players Trainum, who was related to Mamie Gaines, Bessie's sister, died in a car crash, but it didn't just take him. It took his entire family. Clyde Nash, the man who ripped LQ from the sheriff's custody, owned a car garage. One day, a freak accident occurred, leaving him crippled for the rest of his life. Doyle Gaines, Bessie's brother, developed leukemia, and before he died, he lost his mind. Joe Keith Robbins was a severe drunk, and he drank so much he got Jake leg, or form of paralysis from bad liquor. Hugh Pittman drank himself into a deep darkness, and one night, he ended his own life. Bill Greer was another heavy drinker. One winter night, he froze to death, and when they found him, his body had already started to decompose. And then there was Pauline Coffey, one of the people who threw the match that set LQ on fire. Years later, the fire came for her. Her electric blanket caught fire, and she couldn't escape. She burned to death. And what about Bessie? For years, whispers followed her. Some in town believed she had made the entire story up. Bessie had a child out of wedlock the year before, and she had a reputation. And some believe she accused LQ to cover up one of her affairs. Decades later, a researcher uncovered a startling detail. A doctor examined Bessie on the day of her alleged attack. He found no physical signs of violation, but he did find something else. She was pregnant. The doctor suspected that her accusation wasn't about LQ, but It was about hiding her pregnancy, because claiming she was attacked gave her an excuse, one that would allow her to get a legal abortion. And years later, researchers uncovered something else. Stories passed down in the community suggested that even on the day, there were reasons to doubt LQ's guilt. According to one account, a white gas truck driver had been seen that morning walking across the field heading towards Bessie Gaines' home. And there was another piece to this story. Russ Scott, a white man who had driven LQ and the others to work that morning, would later tell officers what should have been obvious. The timeline didn't make sense. LQ was 2.5 miles away, cutting timber. And according to Scott, there was no way he could have made it to the Gaines house and back in time. But none of that mattered, because once the accusation was made, LQ was guilty. That was all the mob needed to know. Bessie lived another 35 years before she died in 1960 at the age of 56. I told you earlier that LQ's mother, Allie, didn't last long after losing her son. Her family said that the weight of what happened to her was too much to bear. She was gone within a year. And Jim Ivey, LQ's father, he lived another 41 years. He died in 1966. He was 93 years old. Jim lived through the first days of Black freedom. He saw Reconstruction. He saw segregation take hold. He watched Jim Crow tighten his grip. He lived through the rise of the Klan, through the Great Depression, through the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. He survived every era of Black struggle after slavery, but he couldn't do one thing. He couldn't save his son. He couldn't protect LQ from the injustice that was constant through every one of those eras. And no matter how long he lived, he carried that to his grave. The mob did what they did to LQ because to them, he wasn't human. That is what was required to carry out this kind of brutality. A person must be stripped of dignity, stripped of their humanity. Only then can you truly engage in something like this. LQ wasn't human to them anymore. And when you add in the race to the equation, it made this act of brutality even easier to carry out. Black people were often stripped of their humanity. How else could they be enslaved? Worked like animals, brutalized, terrorized, lynched, burned alive. But we tell LQ's story because he was human. He was a Black teenager. He was someone's son, someone's brother, a nephew, and a friend. He wasn't an object to be discarded. He was loved and he was cared for. He was nurtured. He wasn't inanimate. He had feelings and he had emotions. He experienced joy and happiness. He experienced pain and fear. He experienced everything that they did to him. And even though they wanted to erase his memory, we won't. We won't let his life be forgotten. We won't let his death be lost to time. We will remember him. We will tell a story for him and for his family and for those who need to know. What LQ endured, what countless Black people endured, was real. It happened for centuries. And despite those who want to turn the page, I won't. And I hope that you won't either. We have to tell these stories because what happened to us was real. We're not making it up, and it still matters today. Now I want to hear from you. Had you ever heard of LQ Ivey before today, and how did it make you feel learning about him? Leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts.
Okay. What a horribly horrific story. An account of a absolutely horrendous, brutal, and just utterly sickening historical event. What happened to this young brother was without words. Call it an injustice, you can call it a travesty, you can call it a horrendous act, an act of cowardice, whatever you want to call it. I just can't imagine being in his position and standing there and knowing that these damn heathens were going to do whatever they wanted to me. And he felt powerless to do anything about it. Completely and utterly powerless. There was nobody he could call. There was nobody he could uh, who would help him, who would fix him, who would resolve this situation for him. And I just imagine the feeling and the pain, the unimaginable. I can't even imagine it. I mean, I literally cannot imagine it. And then his family, his mother, his father, his siblings, even his extended family. You know, to hear this and unreal. It seems unreal, but it's very real. It's very real situations, circumstances that occur with our people historically. And like he talked about Mississippi, Mississippi is such has such a horrendous history, and the name should be changed. I mean, it's that bad. To call it that same name is just crazy. But again, we have to highlight these stories, just like the brother said at the very beginning of the video. We have to tell these stories. We have to revisit these situations. Taking these things away makes us forget what our people have gone through. And when you forget what our people have gone through, you think that we haven't been through anything. But the reality, not just, I talked about his mother, I talked about his family, what about the entire community that had to hear about this? How do you think all of these details were given to this brother where he can give this to us today? This information it's either stored somewhere or is shared verbally. So that's how he's gotten the information. The pictures, where did he get the pictures from?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely horrendous and unreal. I'm gonna yield there. This is a lot to process. Go ahead, Aki.
Khan, this was and you put that very well. I put that very well. I was unaware of this story. I knew about the history of Mississippi. My family. Origins. Here in this captivity. Not too far from Mississippi.
Right.
Where my brother grew up. 5 or 10 miles away from Mississippi in Tennessee. It's definitely hard to process, and we've covered a lot. But these stories never get easier to manage. They always have a way of, I don't know, upsetting your stomach and just upsetting your whole soul and ruach. It makes us want to do something about it, and I'm glad that we decided to bring out, start bringing out stories like this. Some people would argue that our people need to get over what has been done to us here in this captivity. But that's why is it that way for my people?
Right.
When I see you grieving for 9/11 victims, and I'm not taking away. People have a right to grieve and be disturbed with atrocities that have happened to them. But it just seems like when it comes to my people, no one looks at it like that for us. Stories like this, and here's the thing. Here's another reality. We we hear about this story and we see, well, I didn't have the stomach to look at the picture, you know. But you know, we see and hear about these atrocities, but you have to understand the psyche of an individual that would do someone like this,
Right.
and how they look at these people when they're alive, you know.
Right.
So, you know, how, you know, if you could do this to a person, you know, and you know, more humanity is shown to animals that are
Right.
being slaughtered, you know, than what was done to our you know, I call him a young brother, but you know, this would be our, you know, our elder, super elder, you know,
Yeah.
had he
1925.
had the opportunity.
Yeah, 1925. He was 17. So yeah, he would be up there. Up there.
17 years older than Malcolm X, I believe.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a horrendous story, but man, again, these things we have to consider these things. We have to be aware of these things, and we cannot forget that this was the reality of our people. This was our reality. And why is that important? Because it helps explain a lot of the situations, the circumstances, and not to take away accountability from us. I know we are accountable for everything that we've done. And we have uh, parked ourselves in a place of wrongdoing, and we've suffered for that. But there were many situations that we've suffered that was unnecessary, that was completely unnecessary. And this was one, a 17-year-old boy who could not have been at all responsible for what occurred, uh, should not have had to endure. His family, his community should not have had to endure that situation. And there are many others like that. So, all right, we're going to turn the page here. Uh, Malcolm X, boldest message to America. The speech they tried to bury, Black Culture Unlocked. Shout out to those brothers. Let's try to lighten the mood up a little bit here. I mean, I know that was horrendous. I hope Brother Malcolm can elevate our spirits and lift up uh, our
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 ruachs, you know, our
yeah,
souls. You know, I probably it's getting kind of late. I'll probably fade away during this one. But Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Barakatham, Kwam Yasharala.
Kwam Yashala, Raj Israel, Barak Hashem, Yahweh. Hallelujah. All right, let's get to it.
But don't scare Negroes today with no badge or no white skin or no white sheet or no white anything else. The police the same way. They put their club upside your head and then turn around and accuse you of attacking them. Every case of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this, and it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves.
Imagine a voice so powerful, it shook the foundations of an entire nation. A voice that spoke truth to power and ignited a fire of resistance that still burns today. Malcolm X was more than just a civil rights leader. He was a prophet, a poet, and a warrior for justice. Through his speeches, we experience the raw emotion, the unflinching honesty, and the unwavering commitment to freedom that defined his life's work. Let's journey through Malcolm X's most powerful speeches, and discover the man behind the message. But first, Malcolm X's journey began in Omaha, Nebraska, where he was born Malcolm Little. His early life was characterized by tragedy and turmoil, with his father's murder and his mother's institutionalization. But it was in prison that Malcolm discovered his true purpose. He consumed books from the prison library and converted to the Nation of Islam. Under the guidance of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm found his voice and his mission. As he spoke to crowds of thousands, his message of black pride and self-empowerment electrified a generation. Let's listen to an excerpt from his iconic Message to the Grassroots speech, delivered in 1963.
Agree that America has a very serious problem. Not only does America have a very serious problem, but our people have a very serious problem. America's problem is us. We're her problem. The only reason she has a problem is she doesn't want us here. And every time you look at yourself, be you black, brown, red, or yellow, a so-called Negro, you represent a person who poses such a serious problem for America because you're not wanted. Once you face this as a fact, then you can start plotting a course that will make you appear intelligent instead of unintelligent. What you and I need to do is learn to forget our differences. When we come together, we don't come together as Baptists or Methodists. You don't catch hell because you're a Baptist, and you don't catch hell because you're a Methodist. You don't catch hell because you're a Methodist or a Baptist. You don't catch hell because you're a Democrat or a Republican. You don't catch hell because you're a Mason or an Elk. And you sure don't catch hell because you're an American, because if you was an American, you wouldn't catch no hell. You catch hell because you're a black man. You catch hell, all of us catch hell for the same reason. So we are all black people, so-called Negroes, second-class citizens, ex-slaves. You are nothing but an ex-slave. You don't like to be told that. But what else are you? You are ex-slave. You didn't come here on the Mayflower. You came here in a slave ship, in chains, like a horse or a cow or a chicken. And you were brought here by the people who came here on the Mayflower. You were brought here by the so-called pilgrims or founding fathers. They were the ones who brought you here. We have a common enemy. We have this in common. We have a common oppressor, a common exploiter, and a common discriminator. So once we all realize that we have this common enemy, then we unite on the basis of what we have in common. And what we have foremost in common is that enemy, the white man. He's an enemy to all of us. I know some of you all think that some of them aren't enemies. Time will tell. In Bandung, back in, I think, 1954, was the first unity meeting in centuries of black people. And once you study what happened at the Bandung Conference and the results of the Bandung Conference, it actually serves as a model for the same procedure you and I can use to get our problems solved. At Bandung, all the nations came together. They were dark nations from Africa and Asia. Some of them were Buddhists. Some of them were Muslim. Some of them were Christian. Some of them were Confucianists. Some were atheists. Despite their religious differences, they came together. Some were communists, some were socialists, some were capitalists. Despite their economic and political differences, they came together. All of them were black, brown, red, or yellow. The number one thing that was not allowed to attend the Bandung Conference was the white man. He couldn't come. Once they excluded the white man, they found that they could get together. Once they kept him out, everybody else fell right in and fell in line. This is the thing that you and I have to understand. And these people who came together didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have jet planes. They didn't have all of the heavy armaments that the white man has, but they had unity. They were able to submerge their little petty differences and agree on one thing, that though one African came from Kenya and was being colonized by the Englishmen, and another African came from the Congo and was being colonized by the Belgian, and another African came from Guinea and was being colonized by the French, and another came from Angola and was being colonized by the Portuguese. When they came to the Bandung Conference, they looked at the Portuguese and at the Frenchman and at the Englishman and at the other Dutchman and learn or realize that the one thing that all of them had in common, they were all from Europe. They were all Europeans, blonde, blue-eyed, and white-skinned. They began to recognize who their enemy was. The same man that was colonizing our people in Kenya was colonizing our people in the Congo. The same one in the Congo was colonizing our people in South Africa and in southern Rhodesia and in Burma and in India and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. They realized all over the world where a dark man was being oppressed, he was being oppressed by the white man. Where the dark man was being exploited, he was being exploited by the white man. So they got together under this basis that they had a common enemy. And when you and I here in Detroit and in Michigan and in America, who have been awakened today, look around us, we too realize here in America, we all have a common enemy. Whether he's in Georgia or Michigan, whether he's in California or New York, he's the same man. Blue eyes and blonde hair and pale skin. Same man. So what we have to do is what they did. They agreed to stop quarreling among themselves. Any little spat that they had, they'd settle it among themselves. Go into a huddle. Don't let the enemy know that you got a disagreement. Instead of us airing our differences in public, we have to realize we're all the same family. And when you have a family squabble, you don't get out on the sidewalk. If you do, everybody calls you uncouth, unrefined, uncivilized, savage. If you don't make it at home, you settle it at home. You get in the closet, argue it out behind closed doors. And then when you come out on the street, you pose a common front, a united front. And this is what we need to do in the community and in the city and in the state. We need to stop airing our differences in front of the white man. Put the white man out of our meeting, number one, and then sit down and talk shop with each other. That's all you gotta do. I would like to make a few comments concerning the difference between the Black Revolution and the Negro Revolution. There's a difference. Are they both the same? And if they're not, what is the difference? What is the difference between a Black Revolution and a Negro Revolution? First, what is a revolution? Sometimes I'm inclined to believe that many of our people are using this word revolution loosely, without taking careful consideration what this word actually means and what its historic characteristics are. When you study the historic nature of revolutions, the motive of a revolution, the objective of a revolution, and the result of a revolution, and the methods used in a revolution, you may change words. You may devise another program. You may change your goal and you may change your mind.
In 1964, it was a time for change. The ballot or the bullet. It was a choice that couldn't be ignored. For too long, Black Americans have been stripped of their voting rights, and their voices have been silenced. But they refused to remain silent anymore. They'll use the ballot, and if that doesn't work, they'll use the bullet. It was time for the Black man to take a stand and fight for their rights. The future was in our hands and in their ability to make a decision. And they didn't back down.
Mr. Moderator, Reverend Cleave, and Milton, brothers and sisters, and friends, and I see some enemies. In fact, think we'd be fooling ourselves if we had an audience this large and didn't realize that there were some enemies present. This afternoon, we want to talk about the ballot or the bullet. The ballot or the bullet explains itself. But before we get into it, since this is the year of the ballot or the bullet, I would like to clarify some things that refer to me personally, concerning my own personal position. I'm still a Muslim. That is, my religion is still Islam. My religion is still Islam. I still credit Mr. Muhammad for what I know and what I am. He's the one who opened my eyes. And at present, I'm the minister of the newly founded Muslim Mosque Incorporated, which has its offices in the Teresa Hotel right in the heart of Harlem. That's the Black Belt in New York City. And when we realize that Adam Clayton Powell is a Christian minister, he has the Abyssinia Baptist Church, but at the same time, he's more famous for his political struggling. And Dr. King is a Christian minister from Atlanta, Georgia, or in Atlanta, Georgia, but he's become more famous for being involved in the civil rights struggle. There's another in New York, Reverend Galamison. I don't know if you've heard of him out here. He's a Christian minister from Brooklyn, but has become famous for his fight against the segregated school system in Brooklyn. Reverend Cleed, right here, is a Christian minister here in Detroit. He's the head of the Freedom Now Party. All of these are Christian ministers. All of these are Christian ministers, but they don't come to us as Christian ministers. They come to us as fighters in some other category. I'm a Muslim minister. The same as they are Christian ministers, I'm a Muslim minister. And I don't believe in fighting today in any one front, but on all fronts. In fact, I'm a black nationalist freedom fighter. Islam is my religion, but I believe my religion is my personal business. It governs my personal life, my personal morals. And my religious philosophy is personal between me and the God in whom I believe. Just as the religious philosophy of these others is between them and the God in whom they believe. And this is best this way. Were we to come out here discussing religion, we'd have too many differences from the outstart, and we could never get together. So today, though Islam is my religious philosophy, my political, economic, and social philosophy is black nationalism. You and I, as I say, if we bring up religion, we'll have differences, we'll have arguments, we'll never be able to get together. But if we keep our religion at home, keep our religion in the closet, keep our religion between ourselves and our God, but when we come out here, we have a fight that's common to all of us against the enemy who is common to all of us. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that the black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. Okay? By the same token, the time when that same white man, knowing that your eyes are too far open, can send another Negro into the community get you and me to support him so he can use him to lead us astray. Those days are long gone. The political philosophy of black nationalism only means that if you and I are going to live in a black community, and that's where we're going to live, because as soon as you move into as soon as you move out of the black community into their community, it's mixed for a period of time, but they are gone, and you're right there all by yourself. We must understand the politics of our community, and we must know what politics is supposed to produce. We must know what part politics play in our lives. And until we become politically mature, we will always be misled, led astray, or deceived or maneuvered into supporting someone politically who doesn't have the good of our community at heart. So the political philosophy of black nationalism only means that we will have to carry on a political program of re-education to open our people's eyes, make us become more politically conscious, politically mature. And then we will, whenever we get ready to cast our ballot, that ballot will be cast for a man of the community who has the good of the community at heart. And the economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we should own and operate and control the economy of our community. You would never find, you can't open up a black store in a white community. White man won't even patronize you. And he's not wrong. He got sense enough to look out for himself. And you who don't have sense enough to look out for yourself. The white man is too intelligent to let someone else come and gain control of the economy of his community. But you will let anybody come in and control the economy of your community, control the housing, control the education, control the jobs, control the businesses under the pretext that you want to integrate. No, you're out of your mind. The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we have to become involved in a program of re-education to educate our people into the importance of knowing that when you spend your dollar out of the community in which you live, the community in which you spend your money becomes richer and richer. The community out of which you take your money becomes poorer and poorer. And because these Negroes who have been misled, misguided, are breaking their necks to take their money and spend it with the man. The man is becoming richer and richer, and you're becoming poorer and poorer. And then what happens? The community in which you live becomes a slum. It becomes a ghetto. The conditions become run down. And then you have the audacity to complain about poor housing in a run-down community. Why, you run it down yourself when you take your dollar out. And you and I are in a double track, because not only do we lose by taking our money someplace else and spending it, when we try and spend it in our own community, we're trapped because we haven't had sense enough to set up stores and control the businesses of our community. The man who's controlling the stores in our community is a man who doesn't look like we do. He's a man who doesn't even live in the community. So you and I, even when we try and spend our money in the block where we live or the area where we live, we're spending it with a man who, when the sun goes down, takes that basket full of money in another part of the town. So we're trapped, double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go, we find that we're trapped. And every kind of solution that someone comes up with is just another trap. But the political and economic philosophy of black nationalism, the economic philosophy of black nationalism shows our people the importance of setting up these little stores and developing them and expanding them into larger operations. Woolworth didn't start out big like they are today. They started out with a dime store and expanded and expanded and expanded until today they're all over the country and all over the world, and they're getting some of everybody's money. Now this, what you and I in General Motors, the same way, didn't start out like it is. It started out just a little rat race type operation. And it expanded until today it's where it is right now. And you and I have to make a start. And the best place to start is right in the community where we live.
Malcolm X's vision went far beyond America's borders. He knew that the struggle for human rights was a global one. In 1964, he addressed the United Nations, linking the fight for civil rights to the international struggle for human dignity. He stood in solidarity with oppressed peoples everywhere, from Africa to Asia and Latin America. Malcolm's message resonated with freedom fighters worldwide, inspiring a new era of international cooperation and solidarity. Let's listen to an excerpt from his UN address, a powerful call to action that still echoes today.
Malcolm, what is your purpose here? Well, my purpose here is to remind the African heads of state that there are 22 million of us in America who are also of African descent, and to remind them also that we are the victims of America's colonialism or American imperialism, and that our problem is not an American problem, it's a human problem. It's not a Negro problem, it's a problem of humanity. It's not a problem of civil rights, but a problem of human rights. And what do you hope for from this conference? Well, we hope to bring pressure upon them, or rather we hope to impress upon them the importance of their bringing pressure and world opinion upon the United States to take some meaningful effort to solve our problem in America. We want them to help us get our problem before the United Nations and charge America with violating our human rights in the same way that South Africa is charged with violating the human rights of our people in that area. And what sort of reaction have you been getting from the African leaders? Well, I've gotten a good reaction, a very sympathetic reaction, and an understanding reaction. Many of them have been misinformed by the American government into thinking that black people in America don't identify with Africa, and therefore they've restrained themselves from voicing their interest in our problem. But I've impressed upon them that our problem is their problem, as well as their problems are our problem.
Malcolm X knew that true freedom required economic empowerment. He advocated for self-determination, urging African Americans to take control of their own destiny. We must learn to live together as brothers, he said, or perish together as fools. Malcolm envisioned a future where black-owned businesses thrived and communities were self-sufficient. He encouraged entrepreneurship, skill building, and collective economic action. Here's an excerpt from his speech on economic empowerment, a powerful call to action that remains relevant today.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that our own mind has to be changed. We have to change our mind about ourselves.
In what way?
Well, so he teaches us the importance of moral reformation, a knowledge of self. And for instance, the average so-called Negro, he doesn't think that he can go into business and provide jobs for himself. And because of this, he thinks that he can only get a job from the white man, or he can only get clothes from the white man, or he can only get food from the white man. And we who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are taught that the same thing that the white man has done for himself and his kind, if our people could if we could be cured of our slave mentality that was indoctrinated into us during slavery, we would realize that just as the white man can do these things for himself and his kind, we can get together in unity and harmony and do the same thing for ourselves and our kind.
The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we should own and operate and control the economy of our community. You would never find, you can't open up a black store in a white community. White man won't even patronize you. And he's not wrong. He got sense enough to look out for himself. And you who don't have sense enough to look out for yourself. The white man is too intelligent to let someone else come and gain control of the economy of his community. But you will let anybody come in and control the economy of your community, control the housing, control the education, control the jobs, control the businesses under the pretext that you want to integrate. No, you're out of your mind. The economic philosophy of black nationalism only means that we have to become involved in a program of re-education to educate our people into the importance of knowing that when you spend your dollar out of the community in which you live, the community
in which you spend your money becomes richer and richer. The community out of which you take your money becomes poorer and poorer. And because these Negroes who have been misled and misguided are breaking their necks to take their money and spend it with the man is becoming richer and richer, and you're becoming poorer and poorer. And then what happens? The community in which you live becomes a slum. It becomes a ghetto. The conditions become run down. And then you have the audacity to complain about poor housing in a rundown community. While you run it down yourself when you take your dollar. And you and I are in a double trap, because not only do we lose by taking our money someplace else and spending it, when we try and spend it in our own community, we're trapped because we haven't had sense enough to set up stores and control the businesses of our community. The man who's controlling the stores in our community is a man who doesn't look like we do. He's a man who doesn't even live in the community. So you and I, even when we try and spend our money in the block where we live or the area where we live, we're spending it with a man who, when the sun goes down, takes that basket full of money in another part of the town. So we're trapped, double trapped, triple trapped. Anywhere we go, we find that we're trapped. And every kind of solution that someone comes up with is just another trap. But the political and economic philosophy of black nationalism, the economic philosophy of black nationalism shows our people the importance of setting up these little stores and developing them and expanding them into larger operations. Woolworth didn't start out big like they are today. They started out with a dime store and expanded and expanded and expanded until today they're all over the country and all over the world, and they're getting some of everybody's money. Now, this, what you and I in General Motors, the same way, didn't start out like it is. It started out just a little rat race type operation, and it expanded and expanded until today it's where it is right now. And you and I have to make a start. And the best place to start is right in the community where we live. So our people not only have to be re-educated to the importance of supporting black business, but the black man himself has to be made aware of the importance of going into business. And once you and I go into business, we own and operate at least the businesses in our community. What we will be doing is developing a situation wherein we will actually be able to create employment for the people in the community. And once you can create some employment in the community where you live, it will eliminate the necessity of you and me having to act ignorantly and disgracefully, boycotting and picketing someplace else, trying to beg him for a job. We have to become involved in a program of re-education to educate our people into the importance of knowing that when you spend your dollar out of the community in which you live, the community in which you spend your money becomes richer and richer. The community out of which you take your money becomes poorer and poorer. And because these Negroes who have been misled, misguided, are breaking their necks to take their money and spend it with the man is becoming richer and richer, and you're becoming poorer and poorer. And then what happens? The community in which you live becomes a slum. It becomes a ghetto. The conditions become run down. And then you have the audacity to complain about poor housing in a rundown community. While you run it down yourself when you take your dollar.
Malcolm X's legacy extends far beyond his own time. He inspired generations of activists, from the Black Panthers to Black Lives Matter. His message of self-love, self-defense, and self-empowerment continues to resonate. Today, leaders like Angela Davis and Ta-Nehisi Coates cite Malcolm X as a major influence. His impact is not limited to America. He's a hero to freedom fighters worldwide. As we reflect on Malcolm X's life and speeches, we're reminded that his work is far from over. The struggle for justice, equality, and human rights continues. In Malcolm X's own words, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm's most powerful speeches leave us with a profound sense of responsibility. We must continue to learn from Malcolm X's legacy, to be inspired by his courage, and to carry forward his work, continuing his legacy to continuous fulfillment. The struggle for a more just and equitable world is ongoing. Let us honor Malcolm X's memory by continuing to fight for the freedom, justice, and human dignity that he so passionately advocated for. Subscribe and share this video to join the movement.
All right, all praises to the Most High once again. Praises to the Most High. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. And man, I'm so thankful that the Abba, the Father, gave us a man such as Brother Malcolm X or Malcolm Shabazz. This brother, this elder, was a magnificent man in the sense of his dealing with his people. And we should seek to be in the same lights as Brother Malcolm. What good can I do for my people? What positivity can I put in the earth for my people? I know in this corrupt society, you're led to believe that somehow, some way, your concern should be for all people. Your concern should be for not just the people who look like you and look like me, but all people, Asians and Hispanics and blacks and not just blacks, other forms of blacks and Caucasians and all of these other people. These should all be who you consider your people. I beg to differ, because if we're consumed with concern for everybody else, who's consumed in concern for us? How can we be so concerned for everybody else when that's going to leave no one concerned for you, for us? Because regardless of what you think or how you feel about the situation, nobody is going to have more concern for you than you. Nobody cares about your house more than you do. Nobody cares about your welfare more than you do. Nobody cares about your wealth building than your conquering, than your ability to get results than you. And if you allow anybody else to take precedent over you, then so sorry, but you're going to be put in the back and left behind. All right. I'm going to go ahead and end this video off here. It's been a good long night. Lots of good information that came out. Once again, all praises to the Most High. We do this for a specific purpose. The reason we do it, Romans chapter 10 and verse 1, brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Ha'abba, to the Father, for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people free from bondage. That is the reason why we do this thing. Now, how are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the belief and the faith in Hamashiach, the Messiah, to come and do what the Father has instructed and set us free. Second of all, Ecclesiastes chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important for us to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo. I was joined earlier by my most esteemed Kenaniah, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bahashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shah, Barakatham, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four corners of the earth. I say shalom wa baruchim. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, shalom, family. Peace and blessings, Yisrael. Kwam Yasha Allah, Barak Hashem, Yahweh.